but you're going nowhere. Don't blame me for what you've done, because I know that you were having fun.
Welcome to the Clarified Realty Podcast, exposing the real estate secrets your agent doesn't want you to know. Here's your host, Tom Clary.
Well, don't you just walk away. That's when I'll say.
Welcome to Clarified Realty Podcast. I'm Tom Clary, and I'm your host. I'm a real estate agent here in the beautiful state of California, Los Angeles to be exact. I'm here with my co-host, Ron Bruno. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well, Tom.
Good.
Thank you for asking, sir.
Anything new or different with you?
It's our anniversary. And when I say our, I mean
You're not
Karen.
talking about us.
I'm not talking about Tom and me. I'm talking about Karen.
Trust me, I'm trying to forget the day we met.
Beautiful wife. We're celebrating our 5-year wedding anniversary today.
Somebody put up with you for 5 years.
Yes.
That's remarkable.
It's incredible. She actually put up with me longer than that. Just happened to has been married to me for 5 years. We knew each other before we got married.
Right, before you guys
We were not in an arranged marriage.
got into basically a forever commitment.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, good for you.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I had another, by the way, incident with a terrible agent today.
Oh, no.
Oh, my God. It was terrible.
What
It was the
happened?
absolute worst thing ever.
Oh, man.
Now, look, when you go and you schedule out, going to see showings and all that. And,
Yeah.
And, look, it's by no means an exact science, right? So sometimes you're a few minutes early, or whatever, you're running a little bit behind.
Sure.
So
It's LA.
It's LA,
Yeah.
and traffic is bad and all that. But this
Yep.
time, we got really ahead of schedule.
Oh.
And so, we're like, let's go see and knock on the door and see if we can go in. So I knock on the door, and and I realize, we're way early. So, let's just come back. We'll just come back. And so we're walking away with my client away, and the person who owns the house, opens up the door and I'm like, oh, hey, I'm so totally sorry. I'm so sorry. I realized how early we are. We'll just come back. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
About 10 minutes later, I get a text from the agent that is literally like, that is the most unprofessional, terrible thing that you've ever done, that anybody's ever done.
No.
That you did that is, whatever. And I'm like, holy cow, dude!
You interrupted his family feud. I mean, what happened?
What the hell? I literally I texted him. I'm like,
right.
Listen, I apologize profusely to that person. It's like it's imperfect. You know that it's imperfect.
Right.
He's like, it's not that hard.
Oh my God.
Look, douchebag.
Wow.
I'm trying to tell you that we're human here.
Right.
And by the way, professionalism works two ways.
Yeah.
Yes, I acknowledge that I was a little bit early, and I apologized for it, and that's it.
Yeah.
But I have a very good buyer with me.
Yes.
Who could swoop in and buy your property.
Right.
And I now don't want to do any business with you whatsoever.
Man.
I know that later on, 2 weeks into this transaction, you're going to make me miserable.
Right.
Why on earth would I subject myself or my client to that?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's the lack of professionalism on his side.
Right.
And I can't believe that they're just about getting, they're giving everybody licenses nowadays, I guess, or I don't know. It's like,
I guess so. Didn't have enough coffee or something.
Maybe the market is so good that people are just like, they don't care how they treat you or whatever. It's like, buy the house, don't buy the house.
Yeah.
But in a complete coincidental act of symbolism, he was totally wearing a black hat. He was wearing a black fedora, like he was, Heisenberg, right?
That's so funny.
Breaking Bad,
So
Breaking Bad.
as we were driving around, so Karen dropped me off. So as we were driving around, there was a sticker on the back of someone's car, and it was Heisenberg.
It was Heisenberg.
It was Heisenberg. I think it's a sign.
It's like, what do you think? You're some sort of badass that,
Wow.
you're just selling a house, dude.
Oh, man.
Settle down.
Good Lord. Were you in North Hollywood or?
That was exactly in North Hollywood. That's so fun. How would you guess North Hollywood?
Hipster haven.
I mean, seriously. It's
Nothing against North Hollywood, but.
Nothing at all against North Hollywood, but it was.
I know my chapeaus.
You guess so. You're a spotter. You're
Apparently.
a spotter.
Yes.
So what are we doing news-wise today? What's going on?
Biggest news of the week has really been the Fed. Right?
Yeah.
So Janet Yellen and the Federal Open Market Committee, they met, and the result was they decided that in September they are going to keep rates the same.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about just a couple of weeks ago that they were potentially going to raise it, but it sounds like they're keeping everything the same.
And the market anticipated that, right? So they consensus was that the Fed was going to keep the rates exactly where they are. And really what we were looking for were a couple of key things. So number one is we wanted to see if there was any hints, tea leaves, what have you, about, because the Fed always speaks in riddles.
They never come out right and say what they're going to do.
Exactly. Yeah. So the hint is that we're looking at potentially raising rates later in the year, right? So we're looking probably about December, right? The next piece of it is also looking into 2018. And, even on this podcast, we talked about, there was a news story that said Fed's only going to raise it one time in 2018. But what they did was they outlined what's called the dot plot, right? And the dot plot is where the Federal Reserve, all of the members, they create their own internal illustration, if you will, that actually shows where they are potentially forecasting where they're going to actually raise the rates. And that dot plot showed 3 interest rate rises.
Got it.
Right? And that's good, right?
Yeah.
So that's a good symbol of the economy where, right now we're at about 1.9% inflation, which that's great. Our target is 2%. They don't anticipate that it's going to, get into the 3s or the 4s or, go into crazy, we talked about the $6,000 beer that, we were going to, be happy to buy.
But I would still find a way.
We'd still find a way to buy the $6,000 beer.
I'd be that guy stealing copper off of, telephone lines just to make sure that I can get my beer.
Yeah. We're gonna go and rip off solar panels so we can drink beer, and then sell them back to Steve, who was our guest that we had with Solar Hawk. Yes,
these look just like wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly. He has his stamp on it, right? So that was the big news, and the other piece to that is, they did say that with the hurricanes, right? We've had 2 Category 4 hurricanes, horrible, just devastation in Florida and in Texas. From a U.S. standpoint, obviously the Caribbean has just been decimated, and it's really sad. But from a U.S. standpoint, they said that they do not anticipate that the hurricanes will cause significant damage from an economic standpoint.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was part of
it.
Yeah. So they did include that.
How could they even say that though?
Because people were thinking it.
I guess.
I mean, you have these horrible, these horrible hurricanes that wipe out, just cities.
Well,
and
but I mean,
huge
Puerto
flood
Rico is going to
damage.
be like without, they said, electricity for a year,
6 months,
at least.
Right. Well, there's a difference between our infrastructure and Puerto Rico's infrastructure.
Right. Of course.
Right. Puerto Rico. They're in bankruptcy.
Right.
They don't have the same codes.
Right.
Building standards, all of those things.
Right.
And they also got hit when it was at 165 miles per hour.
Right.
Whereas we got hit at 110. And then 120, but it's based on U.S. standards.
Do you think that there's any kind of impact in terms of it being a part of the United States, and you know what I mean, they didn't even count it as like a whole part of the United States, or like how can they not include the damage that's going to be there?
So I would say from a GDP standpoint, I don't think Puerto Rico
is a blip on the radar.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe Tampa.
Yeah.
Like in terms of just from a
like
macro
a
perspective.
big city.
Yeah, it's like a big city.
Got it.
In terms of what they provide, so they're sugarcane, and I mean, I'm not an encyclopedia. I don't know all of the things with Puerto Rico in terms of the natural products and everything else, but I would think that it's minuscule.
I'm curious if our relief is like our responsibility for relief is the same as it is on something that's in the contiguous U.S. You know what I mean? Like, do they have any kind of do we how much of a responsibility do we have?
I was thinking about that. So Richard Branson, right? He has Necker Island, and you can actually, as a person, you don't have to be a billionaire or a celebrity to actually stay on Necker Island. I looked it up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's actually, you go to Virgin's website and you can actually find it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So you can rent it out, and actually, I was pretty surprised, but for 7 days you can rent out a whole cottage for your family or whatever, and it's like $30,000. I mean, that's a lot of money, but still, that's a commission.
That's Ron Bruno walking around money.
Yeah, not quite.
That's like Ron Bruno long day at Universal Studios money.
Not even.
That's Ron Bruno sitting by the pool in Palm Springs money.
But it's not like, it's not $500,000, right? To have a place there.
Sure,
but
it's not Jay-Z and Beyonce.
But the point is, so I looked up their website and I'm like, what are whether they're, when can you actually rent it? And what it was showing is, okay, due to the hurricane, obviously everything's decimated, but we're accepting reservations starting in October of 2018. So a lot of those buildings and a lot of those resorts, they have insurance.
Yeah.
That's why they have
Sure.
insurance.
Right.
Right. So I would say in terms of relief efforts, yes, there needs to be that humanitarian relief,
Right,
just
of course.
like when there were, horrible, the earthquake in Haiti and everything else.
Right.
But as far as getting things up and running again, the Caribbean's an amazing, beautiful place.
Right.
Right. So
It'll still continue to be a tourist destination. They just
absolutely.
have to get that infrastructure back.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my dad and his wife, they're on their way to Cape Canaveral right now.
Wow, really?
Yes.
Go jump on a boat?
Yep.
Really?
Yep. So
Bolder
they're
people
already
than
up
me.
and running. They're already up and running.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is there any other hurricane coming up? Like, what's going on?
I mean, there's something in the Turks and Caicos, but I think they're going to go.
They're going around it?
They're going around it. Yeah.
Okay, well, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So with the Fed, what they said was that the economy is humming along.
Okay.
It's not overheating. They don't anticipate rapid growth, and they don't really anticipate great growth. It's more like good growth.
Right.
Yeah.
So nothing that they have to correct. Might as well
Exactly.
keep the car going straight.
Yeah. And the other piece is they're also unwinding all of the quantitative easing.
Right.
Right. So they're unwinding their, I think it's $4.5 trillion balance sheet.
Right.
So they're in the process of doing that. But again,
How do they do? What were some of the processes that they used to do that?
well, I mean, what they did was when you had the financial crisis and everything came to a halt,
Right.
they issued all of this debt.
Right.
Right. So they inflated the market and they
Right.
threw out all this debt. And as a result, they were able to, because companies and countries, China,
Yeah.
they were able to buy these bonds and all of this debt. And when you buy a debt, you raise money, right? And that shored up the balance sheet so that we could bail out the big banks and everything
Right,
else, right? So now we don't necessarily need all that debt. So now we're buying it back. So the treasuries are actually buying it back. Right. So what that means is all of those issues, it's shrinking the balance sheet, right?
Right.
Because they're buying it,
Got
it back. So they're calling those bonds.
Got it.
And when they do that, if you do it too fast, then it can really increase rates.
Right.
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 So you have to be very careful about
Right.
how you have that balance.
Got it.
Yep.
Interesting. So I'm just this is from a macro standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of curious, the whole idea of how they dealt with this whole emergency that happened during the crash. Are people looking back on it saying, they probably did it the right thing. They probably did it the way it could have been a lot worse. Or are they saying, no, they probably should have done this instead? Like, after the Great Depression,
Yeah.
I think that folks were always, kind of looking for ways that they could deal if it ever happened again.
Mm-hmm.
Was this new way a success, or was it,
I mean, personally, I think it was an amazing success.
Yeah.
And did not anticipate it at all.
Right.
I mean, I was a financial advisor back in the day, and I was
Right.
in business school. And
Right.
we were, I remember in business school, I would have people at Wells, and I'd have people at Goldman, and I had people at Lehman, and all these other
Yeah.
companies. We're all pointing fingers at each other, right? Because
Right.
I was getting my MBA in finance. Everyone's pointing their fingers at each other, and it's like, no, it's your fault. No, countrywide, it's your fault. All that.
Right.
And it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And I think they had to drop the atomic bomb of flooding the market and saying we're doing a cash infusion of $800 billion
Yeah.
to shore up the economy. And yeah, I mean, what's great about the U.S. is they could just print more money.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a never-ending supply. But then you get into moral hazard and all those other
Sure.
potential issues.
Right.
Now, yeah, could they have done things a little bit better? I mean, you can look at the Hollywood version of The Big Short
Right.
and Too Big to Fail and all
Yeah.
those types of movies where, they said, okay, so we gave all the money to the banks. The banks didn't go out and lend it.
Yeah.
And they kept it for themselves.
Right.
And they enriched the CEOs and the
Yes.
executives' pocketbooks.
Right.
Yeah, that probably wasn't so good.
Got it.
So, maybe if they had a couple more not carrots, I would say more sticks, in making sure those CEOs and executives actually, distributed the money. But then again, as they, as showed in the movie Too Big to Fail, they said the CEOs wouldn't have taken it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, at the time, I think it was pretty brilliant, everything that they did. And still to this day is pretty fascinating that we were able to pull it off.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said where you've got building that confidence.
Right.
And being able to, go in with a, just immense amount of strength. And, people realize that, oh, okay, so we mark to market, these particular securities, but hey, if the U.S. is saying we're good, then those prices that were way down here, it's actually way up here now. Right. So I think over time, it's come back up.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think there's been a lot of lessons from that period. But personally, I think it all worked out the way it should be.
Good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Well, speaking of investments, and speaking of kind of getting your feet wet in different ways of investing, specifically, and since this is a real estate podcast in real estate, today we're talking with Geoff Jaime. He's a real estate broker and asset manager at GT Investments. His company's focus is in multifamily investment real estate. And that's what we're going to be discussing today. Just basically, apartment buildings, properties with 5 or more units. How do you get started investing in them? What do you do? How do you look for them when you're considering investing? And how do you take care of them once you get into one? So, Geoff, how you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Hey,
thanks for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Very nice to have you. So it was interesting because Geoff and I met on an app called Shaper. They left the E off, so it's Shopper. Really, Shopper.
That's right.
But it's basically like Tinder for professionals. But we got together and we had a really good coffee. And I have to say that I was really impressed with your story and basically how you got involved with multifamily investments in the first place.
Yeah.
So when did you start? Kind of like explain your weird trip here. Like how did you get here?
Yeah. So I graduated college in the late 90s, and I got my first job and moved out of my place and thought it would be a good idea to buy a condo. So I left my notice with my landlord and said that, hey, I'm going to go out and buy a condo and do my own thing. Thanks for having me. And he said to me, why don't you go out and buy an apartment building? And I thought, oh, I didn't know I could do that. So he introduced me to his broker, who had helped him acquire a ton of real estate. He did that throughout the 90s. And so, basically over similar coffee that we had, he explained some math to me and just did it right over a napkin, made it really easy. And I said, okay, sounds good. Looks like I could buy up to 4 units with 3 to 3.5% down and make it work. So, of course, I had a job, and my family thought I was crazy, and they said, you'll never be able to do that. You can't pull that off.
You don't want to be a landlord.
40 hours a week and then have this responsibility. And I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. So I did that. I bought my first place in 2000, bought 4 units, and it went well. I bought another place in 2004.
Wow. Was that also 4 unit or less?
It was, so my first place was 4 units. I got a small loan from my mom. It was like $8,000.
Right. But the second one was 4 units?
The second one was 3 units.
3 units.
Yeah,
okay.
and by the time 2004 came around, the market had really heated up. Between 2000 and 2004, the market was pretty hot. So I bought 3 units in Mid-City, LA. And then, the market continued to heat up. I kept working my job. I kept up with my apartments.
Right.
And then I thought, well, I like this so much. I think I want to go out and get my license and at least do this for myself.
Sure.
If I'm not doing it for other people, I think I can at least handle.
Because you're going to save a little bit on your commissions and, get some of that back and right in your pocket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, I had these grand ambitions. Come 2006, the market was super hot, right?
Yeah.
And I'm looking at building and adding on to this 3 unit that I just bought. And I start taking the courses to get my broker's license because at the time you could substitute your college degree for your broker's license, right?
Did the exact same thing.
So, so 2007 rolled around and I could already tell things were looking a little bit odd.
Yeah.
There were some things happening.
Yeah.
And So in any event, I continue to work, and I slowed down a little bit on getting my broker's license.
Okay.
But I went forward with adding on to
your portfolio.
Well, I added on to I tore a house down on this 3-unit.
Oh wow. Okay.
I built a beautiful 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath house.
Oh wow.
Spent a lot of money on it, and I thought I would come out of it and sell it in 2008, 2009.
Right.
But what ended up happening was the crash happened. I ended up staying at my work. I got my broker's license, of course.
Right.
But I held on, and I didn't really come back into real estate again until 2012, which is when I left my job.
But were you still investing at all during that period of time? Like, were you getting any more properties?
No.
So you kind of held off from 2008, 2009 to 2012.
Absolutely. Which in looking back was a mistake, because it was a humongous buying opportunity. We sometimes we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah, of course.
Looking back, it's like, well, the buying window was 2010 to about 2013.
Yeah.
So, but I did realize that the market was improving in 2012, and I was able to do what I ultimately wanted to do, which was just do what I love for a living, sell real estate, manage real estate.
Right.
So I ended up selling those 2 buildings that I bought.
Right.
I bought 2 other buildings. I bought another place. I bought 3 other places, actually. But then I sold a place too. So, here I am again, and it's
so you're still holding on to. Do you have any that are over 5, like are 5 or over?
Yeah, they're actually 2 of the 3 are over 5. So I have a 6-unit and a 5-unit, I should say. So 1 5, 1 6, 1 3.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny that it might be a really kind of an interesting thing, I hope, for the audience out there. Why we keep on saying 1 to 4 and 5 on up. Can you explain? Why don't you go ahead and explain to them why there's a difference between the two?
Yeah. So the main difference between 1 to 4 and 5 plus is the financing. So the government makes it easy to buy up to 4 units, and they're financed much like when you buy a house. 20% down, or in multi-unit up to 4 units, 25% down will put you into a place. But the moment you go 5 units or more, banks will require a larger down payment, in essence. So now there's no Fannie, Freddie. Now they're looking at you to be able to
hold it on your own.
It's a business, and if the payments don't cover the mortgage, you don't get a loan. Right. As a matter of fact, the bank would like for you to have about approximately 20% more revenue to cover your mortgage payment, and then they'll release funds, and that normally means in LA about 40% down. So 40% down gets you into a commercial 5+ unit property, give or take.
Now, are you doing these as a sole investor, or are you like getting in with other folks?
No, I've been my own investor. Again, outside of the initial bit of money that I borrowed from my mom.
Right.
I was able to draw equity from out of my first place, and use that equity to buy another place. Yeah. And of course, leverage is your friend, especially these days because you're looking at interest rates of 4% to borrow money. And if you can compound your money at greater than 4%, that's the name of the game. Yep. Right? So Absolutely. If someone gives you, if you give someone $1 and they give you $1.10, you want to do that as often as you can possibly do it.
And we bring you beer right here.
That's right. Thank you very much. I'm kind of drying up a little bit.
The beer
leverage is your friend.
There you go. So what do you see as kind of where you're looking towards in terms of investment? Like, what do you see that on the horizon?
Well, that's a great question. I actually think we are headed into a selling window. So landlords who own, and I cater my brokerage to people who want to make money in real estate. And I think it's an excellent, because we don't know the top and we don't really know the bottom, right? It's not really possible to gauge.
Never guess, yeah.
Right? But if you look at the data, there are some there is data that we can look at, like inventory.
Right.
That's one of them. The HPI, home price index, is another one, right? And as interest rates rising, inflation rising, so there are all of these different factors that can lead us towards being able to try to determine where the top is. And just based on the data, it looks like we're headed into a window where this is the top end of the cycle.
Yeah.
So I believe, is my opinion, based on the data, that during these next 4 years, it will probably be a good time to unload real estate that you might have.
Interesting.
And that.
So you're not a firm kind of like buy and keep guy. You're you have different philosophies for different circumstances.
Yeah. Well, it just depends on what your position is. I have clients that have done this for many more years than I have, and I made some mistakes along the way. We all do that, right? Now I know for the next cycle, but it really just depends on your position. So if there's listeners out there who maybe they don't have anything and they're thinking about when to make a move. You have to be really careful about making a move today. And when I say careful, I primarily mean that you have that the investor is over leveraged. That's fairly safe. So if you're buying something and it's making money, well, you're probably okay. If you're buying something like with 2 to 4 units in LA, it's very easy to buy something and be cash flow negative. And then when you're cash flow negative and the economy goes bad and maybe your rents come down a little bit, it becomes, and not only psychologically, when your building value drops 200,000 or something from the top, it's just a psychological killer, and also a financial killer, and it just becomes I think harder to hang on to something like that, and then people lose their real estate. That's
do you see, are you, I keep on hearing over and over that there's just not enough places for people. You know what I mean? Which makes me think that there's a kind of a relatively low inventory, but is that not necessarily the case in these kind of larger multifamily apartments?
No, that is the case, but apartments are still not insulated from recession, because when people lose their jobs, your tenants lose their jobs. Your tenants lose their roommates. Vacancy factors increase, and so so long as you can weather those storms, and again, that normally means that you have the right amount of leverage. Then you're okay, and not only that, but making sure that you're buying for the right amount. So how do you determine what the right price to pay is? In single family, it's a certain way. Maybe it's by square foot. Obviously there's comparables, and in multifamily, it's very similar. But there's a little bit more math involved.
So while we're kind of here in terms of talking about what someone should be looking for if they're looking for purchasing a multifamily, what is it like some of the key really kind of things you're looking for in terms of I want them to check off these boxes?
Sure. Okay, so right after timing, so if you can get the timing right, that's probably 60% of your success if you can get that right, which is why I say this is probably a selling window. But if you're going to buy, again, it also depends on how much money you have. Depending on how much money you have, that is going to impact some of your decision. But somebody who wants to get started and they have $250,000, let's say, in the bank, and they want to put it to work because it's certainly not maybe working very well in the bank.
You're not getting a lot of interest there.
No.
So, yeah.
So you're probably going to take that to somewhere rural to suburban. Okay. I shouldn't say rural. Let me go. You're going to go somewhere suburban.
Okay.
And it depends on what you want to do. If you're going to buy and hold, suburban's good. And also if you're going to sell it, suburban's good for this reason. When market cycles heat up, your urban market goes first. LA is pretty hot, right? And LA's likely going to go sideways for a little bit. Maybe,
explain sideways.
I think as far as pricing goes, we're not going to see 5%, 7% increases in home values.
Right.
We're going to see, again, there'll be some exceptions, but just as a general rule, I think we'll see smaller blips of inflation or smaller blips of increase in property values. Okay. But what's happening is, because the urban market is so saturated and people have money to spend, they're going into suburban areas and putting their money to work. So what does that mean? It means your suburban market's likely going to pop at 4 to 5%. So you're going to actually have better return on your investment at this stage in a suburban market than an urban market.
Okay.
This is for someone who wants to get in and potentially get out. So I'm talking short-term hold.
Not like the landlords that are landlords for 20, 30 years. You're
right.
talking about the folks who are kind of making their big buys and then getting out.
Yeah, I mean within 1 to 3 years. I don't mean like a flip within 6 months, but I mean someone who wants to come in, clean up some units, increase some rents.
What is the benefit to that, though? I mean, why would you do that rather than hold it for 20, 30 years?
Well,
just generating income.
Yeah. Okay. So it depends on the market cycle, but in general, most of the money is made on the sale. So when someone goes in and they buy and they hold, it's a great strategy.
So what you're saying is that when, I'm sorry,
Sure.
But let me just see if I'm getting it.
Yeah.
Is that you're saying that if you're getting a monthly revenue from your 8 units or whatever, that's never going to be as big of a payoff as if you're appreciating and you make an extra,
Exactly.
And then that's the big payday.
Exactly. The cash flow is going to be peanuts in comparison to someone who is managing their building more aggressively. And what I mean by that is raising the rents. So because an apartment building's value is based on its rents, right? So if I gave you a choice and I said, we have 2 apartment buildings, they're both $1 million each. One of them generates $100,000 in gross revenue. The other one generates $50,000 in gross revenue, and they're very similar in every set of the way.
Right.
Which building do you want? You want the right?
Yeah, 100.
The one, yeah, right. Yeah,
I thought I'd answer if it's
the only time you take the one that's 50,000 is if you believe its gross rent potential is 200,000.
Right, and at some point.
Yes.
Right.
So you believe that, you know what, I'm going to pay the premium for it, but I also know that I can get the rents to 200, where on the other building I can only get to 125.
Right.
So I can make that kind of decision as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, part of what you do is managing these assets. Explain what that, I mean, like a property manager, is that what we're really talking about? Or, okay, so
absolutely.
Explain like what the day in the life of the everyday property manager is.
Sure. Well,
are you dealing with a lot of really horrible
well, let me tell you,
and
I think, quite frankly, there's all sorts of different pieces of real estate. There's the lending, there's the sales, there's the development, there's the management, and I do think that the management portion is sort of that's the grunt part of the real estate business.
And I think that's what everybody kind of shies away from.
It's not the business for everyone.
Right.
I only manage my own units, and that's enough for me.
Oh, okay, got it.
I help clients manage theirs, especially new clients. I get them started.
Like a consulting kind of thing?
Exactly.
Got it.
Someone buys something, they're fairly new, they want to know how to do many things.
Right.
I help them get started.
Right.
And it's not too bad. But today I got a phone call for maintenance, right?
Yeah.
I met a handyman in Echo Park
right.
at 8 a.m. Bought some supplies.
Yeah.
Told him what he needed to do, and then I left. But that sounds really easy. But you get the complaints.
Well, I mean, and also I would think that do you ever take into consideration, I'm sure you do, not just the location in terms of what's good for the investment, but also like, I'm going to have to shag my ass all the way from Encino, all the way to Reseda, all the way to there. You probably need to take that into consideration as well if you're going to do your own property management.
I think so.
Yeah,
absolutely. And do you have a full-time job?
Right. That's
is your wife going to help you?
Right.
Is she available?
Yeah.
What kind of resources do you have? Certainly, teaming up with someone who has some experience in some ways is vital.
Right.
Because you need to be able to have those resources.
Do you feel that if someone is just getting started, do you think it's a good idea for like their first? We had David Dooley on, who was an investor and
my college roommate,
a friend of you, and told us way too many stories about your background. Made me wonder why that woman married you in the first place.
That's funny.
There you go. But one of the things he was saying is that it was probably a good idea for your first investment to do it yourself, so you kind of really know what the warts are and what you're going to be asking someone else to be doing. Do you advise that as well, or do you think it's better to just go ahead and, or does it depend on the person who? Nobody's going to do it better than the owner. Than you. Yeah. Certainly when it becomes too big to be able to do on your own, you have to decide on whether you want to just hand it off to someone or and by the way, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to be handy, right? It's just more about being knowledgeable of people who can help you in those circumstances, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about.
Exactly, yeah. You don't have to be able to put a hammer to nails at all.
I have to say, I get nightmares of like literally, if I ever, when the time comes that I decide to do something like this, what we're talking about is literally, I am not fixing somebody's air conditioner at 2 a.m. It's just not going to happen.
Sure.
I'm the last person you want to call. I'm just going to look at it and go, yep, it's broke.
That's right.
Broke.
And that happens. Hey, you know what? The water heater goes out and they have to take cold showers for 2 or 3 days. Yeah. It happens at your own home though too, right? So, you have to deal with it.
What is that kind of, is there a legal issue in terms of that though?
Well, absolutely. If you let it go for anything that would be deemed as unreasonable, then you have some exposure or some liability.
Right.
In LA, that would mean mainly a phone call to the housing department and the housing department pressuring you to a degree to get it done. But
you don't want to be in a slump.
No, you have time though. It doesn't mean you have to get out of bed and get it done.
That's exactly what
I'm
getting
at. Or if it's Sunday, it doesn't mean you need to pay the extra rate to get the guy out there on Sunday. Shut the water off and get the guy out there on Monday.
That's very interesting.
I'm not going to pay the.
I'm such a kind of like, I just know that as my own personality. It's very like if someone calls me up and I'm like, somebody steps on my foot, I say, I'm sorry. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a good thing in terms of, so I'm always like, what can I do to help? What can I do? Oh my God, everything's falling apart. And really, so it's not, it should be a reasonable kind of like, it's not like 3 a.m. I've got to say, kiss my kids and go, I'll see you tomorrow.
Absolutely.
I'm going to go.
Yeah, no, you definitely would do just fine. You have your standards are very high, and really the city has a very reasonable standard for you to be able to accommodate people when things go wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
So, where are you? Are you looking in just LA, or are you kind of looking around? Where are you? I mean, we kind of discussed this a little briefly in our coffee. Are you still looking for other places, or like emerging markets? Or?
Well, I'm not in particular, no, but I do think that we talked a little bit about rates and the Fed, believing that things are pretty good. But what's interesting is that markets like LA, San Francisco, New York are better than just good. They're pretty hot. Yeah. While the rest of America has slowed to get caught up, right? Yeah. So I do think that there are opportunities in other markets outside of
And the reason
LA.
I ask is not just about, how we doing in, whatever different cities, but also how do you feel about being an absentee landlord?
Sure.
Being, someone who is calling in these fixes from 300 miles away.
I have 3 units in a submarket of Atlanta.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I feel perfectly fine about them because the return on your investment is very high.
Yeah.
I bought 3 units for $150,000. They're 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes. Atlanta, 20 minutes outside of the city, goes pretty rural pretty fast. And so people are buying homes for 60, 70. Now they're buying them for like 80, 85,000.
Right.
But so long as you do your research, you fly there, you don't just do this remotely the entire time.
Right.
You have to actually go to the market, drive the market, know where you're buying, and then you can come back, do your research, and figure out where it is you want to buy, how much you want to spend, and then you're always doing your math. You're always you always want to, again, like I said, you want to make sure you're not overpaying, and so just because it's another part of the country, you still want to make sure that you compare what you're buying against what other people are paying.
Sure.
And but yeah, I think it's a good way to get into the.
I had a very interesting conversation with a friend of mine who's also an agent, and I may have mentioned it before on the podcast, and that she almost exclusively buys outside of California because that's where the price point is, where she can afford to buy a house. And she said something incredibly interesting in that, look, there's Yelp pretty much everywhere. You can go and find the 5-star plumbers, the 5-star, and if you hire a property manager, what do you think they're doing really? I mean, they know some good plumbers, they know some good handymen, they know some good. You can basically do the same thing. And by the way, your phone works the same to the other, their cell phone as well. You know what I mean? Like, they're just like the property manager calling them and saying, hey, get over to my property and fix this thing and take a couple of pictures so I know that it was done right, or something that's,
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, the U.S. is so much smaller now with technology,
Absolutely,
right? I mean,
it's
like we all have cell phones, we all have the internet.
Yeah.
And although you're likely not going to visit as often, but you can still get it done better than you could maybe 20 years ago, right?
So I'm going to ask a kind of a deeper question here. What is it that you think psychologically got you over the hump of making that jump into something that a lot of people won't even think about? What do you think it was that separated you from Joe Blow, who would even think like, for them, a single family home is like a huge deal.
Yeah.
But what was that thing that you think that about yourself, personality wise or whatever, that was like, oh, you know what? I can do this.
I think it was a little bit of just maybe being a little naive, quite frankly.
Yeah.
It was one of those things where, so far everything's been fine, right? I'm saying everything's great, beautiful, but
jury's still out, Tom.
Listen, it is a tough job.
Yeah.
I've been to court, I've been to trial, I've been on the stand.
Yes.
I've been, I know Department 94 at Stanley Mosque really well, which is where evictions happen. You don't get paid. Someone destroys your place.
Right.
I did this in my 20s, and I spent weekends painting. I did some things. I've learned a lot. It's been an amazing experience, but it isn't for everyone, that's for sure. And I think part of it was, I just didn't know how much work it was going to be, and so I said, all right, let's just do it. But I think I've always just had a little bit of that spirit in me. I don't know, I've always wanted to be on my own.
Yeah. If there were folks out there that were kind of toying with it, what do you think? What would you say to them? Like in terms of, like, I've thought about how I want to do. Like, this could play a part in my life.
Yeah.
What would you say to them if you were advising them?
Well, I would advise them to do their research.
Right.
That's for sure. And then I would advise them to talk to someone else that has done it. Yeah. And ask about the pros and the cons.
Right. Are we talking like a mentor, or do you talk about, or just somebody that?
That would be, yeah. I mean, if they knew someone that they could rely on and depend on, that is, I think, ideal. Even my original landlord, I did have him there for a little bit, and he did come by and
that's nice
help me out a few times. And I also learned from his style. He had a certain style. His apartments were all really nice and neat and clean and cool.
Right.
So I did pick up quite a bit from him.
How do you sell? Like, how is it when it gets down to where you've got that vacancy? Mm-hmm. What are take us through some of the steps they use to fill that spot?
Yeah. Again, it used to be a newspaper ad.
Yeah.
It used to be the recycler. I'm talking late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
And now it's West Side Rentals and Craigslist.
So you do kind of lean on those services.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you don't even need to have or spend the money anymore on advertising. It used to be a budget item in your on your spreadsheet. Yeah, now it's like you don't even need to do that anymore. It's all online. It's photos. You do it yourself. You don't. You just.
How much marketing do you do? Do you do like photography? Do you do?
No, the apartment stuff is all. It's your iPhone.
Sure.
It's a do-it-yourself thing.
I would assume at the moderate price point.
Yes, exactly.
If you're doing something that's $50,000 a month, you probably want to take a couple of good pictures.
Even $10,000 a month for me was probably good. Good idea to get some good photography in there.
Right.
But I'm talking about just the bread and butter. $1,500, $1,800, $1,000 unit. It's a do-it-yourself thing.
Got it. Ron, you got something?
Yeah. So, Geoff, you were talking early on about how you got into the market, right? So you got into the market where you were putting 3.5% down, right? So you talked about a little bit about, you have to have 25% down, but the 3.5% down, that's owner occupied, right? So,
that's true.
With owner occupied, what's the difference between owning a property as an investment property and then owning it from an owner occupied standpoint?
Yeah, so I think it's a great way to acquire if you have a little bit less down, because you can reap the rewards of ownership, income, right? That income is used towards how much you can buy, so it increases your purchasing power. If you're buying right, then and you get your appreciation, you could potentially trade up from there. So as far as managing goes and living next to your tenants,
that's I think it's a big question mark for me.
Depends on where you're buying. But for the most part, I have lived with my tenants, and it has never been an issue.
Really?
Yeah, it hasn't been.
And how many units was that first property?
That was a 4-unit building. Yeah.
So FHA, and it was an FHA loan?
It was an FHA loan.
So they have that stress test, right? So where the PITI, so the principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, that cannot exceed the rent, right, of all of the units in a 3-unit or a 4-unit. So that's something to keep in mind to the listeners that are out there. If you're looking at 3.5% down is awesome to get a 4-plex and then be able to use the rental, either the existing rent that is already on that particular property, if they have full, if it's fully occupied, or we look at, and when we do the appraisal, we'll actually do a rental schedule. And the appraiser will actually look at comps, right? So they'll look at the comps for the rents in the area, and we then take that number of all the units, even the unit that you're living in, and then there's that stress test, right? So FHA wants to make sure that the rent is going to cover the PITI, right? So that's really key. But it does allow you to get in, and that's a good first start.
And we've talked about it before, about how in this market, especially with the millennials who are having their issues trying to get into places, look, it'd be so much better to spend your money on your own asset rather than flush it down the toilet. I'm sorry to say, Mr. Landlord, but basically, if you can become your own landlord, right? You are in unit 1, and then you've got unit 2, 3, and 4 giving you revenue every single month. It's helping pay for your living there. Maybe I'm missing something, but you're going to be in an apartment anyway.
Yeah, one idea that we were kind of kicking around is, so right now, if you look at the number of baby boomers that are out there, and let's say you have a husband and wife, let's say one of them passes away, and they're living in this, so the widow, she's living in this big empty house, right, with all the memories and everything else, and let's say she's maybe 60 years old, right, and she's working a 9-to-5 job and is a couple years from retirement, but if she could just have an extra income stream outside of Social Security and outside of maybe a little bit of a pension, maybe that would be enough for her to go into retirement early. So one of the ideas is, what if you were to sell the house at the premium where single family residences are now, right? And then be able to, have a smaller mortgage and be able to then get additional units, and your retirement is basically covered because you have a small mortgage, right? So you're not having to
make a big
shell
nut
out
every single month.
and make a big nut every single month. But now you have this extra income stream, right? So now you're able to supplement your retirement because you have all this income. Now, I actually, I talked to my dad about this idea, not for him, but, just like in general, like, people your age, would they be interested in something like that? And what he said was the biggest challenge is going to be the property management side of things.
I agree.
Right. So like grandma's not going to go up there, and
grandma's not going to get on the roof.
She's not getting on the roof. She's not going to get on a ladder
up there. Yeah.
But if there was some way where, there was that bridge where you had a great handyman, a great, property manager, and you were able to kind of build it all as a solution, that could help a lot of people. And it also kind of gets them out of, let's say Altadena or, all these places and like hip granny, right? So like into cooler parts of town and like North Hollywood, fedoras.
And also, this is something you might want to, this is something I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this, is that if there was a property management firm that kind of specialized in helping folks who are kind of using rentals as their kind of stream of income for their retirement.
Yeah.
So that they don't have to go change toilets, and they don't have
they don't have to do a reverse mortgage and pay, exorbitant fees.
Well, no, but I'm talking about like
stuff.
they're not going to do the actual physical activity. It's like,
correct, right. Yeah.
Talking to those investors who are like, look, you'll get your own spot, and then there'll be 2 or 3 other units, or 4 or 5, or whatever you want to do, and somebody else is taking care of that stuff for whatever that cut is.
Exactly.
And we do it especially for people who are 60 and over or something.
I think it's a business model.
I think we figured it out.
What do you think? What do you think?
Jeff, let's do it. Come on.
Good work. Good work.
I mean, you live in one unit.
Oh, I love the idea.
And then the next
you don't
unit,
have to tell me.
and then the next unit, you've got.
You're welcome. He's already dreaming this.
And then the next unit, you Airbnb it, or you have visitors, family,
Oh,
and then the other 2, you have regular tenants.
Absolutely. Yeah, and gives Granny something to do.
Something to
like
do.
a job.
Yeah.
Like they do.
Absolutely.
There's a
Absolutely.
little bit of
They feel
business
like
to
they're
do there.
earning a little bit.
I mean,
absolutely they are.
My mom lives out in Virginia, and it's a single family home, but it's a big farm, right? And they have cows and they have animals and everything else. My mom's not watching TV. She's up at 6 a.m. mucking the stables and feeding pigs and cows and all this stuff, but it keeps her active, right? And that's amazing, right? So I think that's cool to be able to have a project, right?
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of the San Bernardino Mountains, and you take Granny in Altadena, and she cashes out for $800K and then $900K, whatever. I mean,
right?
And then
absolutely.
you go and you buy just so much property with that amount of money, and you could even buy 6 homes cash.
That's true.
And live in one and rent the others, and then you just drive by, check them out, collect your rents.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to work anymore.
No.
Right? Just
no, that's just
take this job and shove it, and I'm not working it anymore.
I'm doing it now.
all added income.
I'm on it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we're going to be wrapping up here, and I just want to say, so is there anything else out there that you would be saying to people who are thinking about doing this? In terms of, like, in your personal experience, what you would say, hey, watch out for this. Watch out for this. Be looking for this.
Sure.
Well,
there's a lot to look out for, but the last thing I'll leave you guys with is LA has rent control. A lot of the big cities have rent control. Some of the cities are looking to install rent control, and rent control adds a certain dynamic to managing property, and for many people it's one of those things to just stay away from, just quite frankly.
So it's so funny that you're advocating. Is that what you're advocating? Stay away from areas with that?
Well, here's what I'm saying is, if you're young and ambitious and you're and you want an opportunity, rent control is for you. Rent control is where there's a challenge, there's an opportunity. Okay. And if you can unlock rents and double your rents and add value, it's a job.
Can I just interject though that there was someone who in my office when I used to be at an old another brokerage, and we had a conversation about rent control, and he had a some completely different take on it, and that he was saying that it was a good thing. He's like saying because people stay and you get people not moving out, because that as long as you're figuring that into your bottom line. What are your feelings on that?
Well, that's a passive approach.
Yeah.
If you're okay with what you're getting, it's fine. You're right. When you're busy, you just collect the checks. But again, if you really want to push it, if you really want to increase your profits, then what you're looking to do is you're looking to shake the units out. Right. That's just how it works. And then what you want to do is get your units to market, because you can go from 1,000 to 1,900 in many cases, right? And if you can do that, you can really add a lot of value. Sure. So if you're moving through your apartment building and you get half of your units shaken out and get them to market, you've added a lot of value to your building. Right. And that's why I said if you're just starting out, and you don't want to have that layer, then you stay away from rent control and you work in an open market town like Culver City, Long Beach, and that's great. But if you really want the challenge, then you go city of LA. You buy a rent controlled building, and then you look for ways legally to decontrol your building.
And I think that, not to get too controversial here and whatever that, but what do you feel about the folks who are kind of like, who kind of raise their fist at that and kind of say that's not fair and blah blah blah. How do you feel about that?
The system is about winners and losers, okay? And here's what I mean by that. You have people in Santa Monica that have the $700 one bedroom apartment that probably has a market value of $2,500, right? They're a winner. The rent control works for them. But then you have the millennial, they want to move to Santa Monica and they have to pay $2,500 a month to live in a very similar one bedroom right next door. Right. So in my view, it creates a system where there is less vacancy. There's less because nobody moves. So if nobody's moving, then the vacancy rate is so low, it's artificial.
And it makes moving into those areas
more expensive.
Incredibly more expensive.
More expensive. So isn't it ironic that what we're trying to do is keep rents low, but in essence, really what's happening is we're keeping rents low for a certain group of people that are like protected. Right. And all of the people that want to move into town, LA, Santa Monica, West Hollywood, even Beverly Hills, they have to pay a premium because there's only so few units available, mainly because people aren't leaving those units. Right. That's really how I feel about it. And as a landlord, hey, look, if I know what I'm buying it, and there's a certain system for how you manage through that, and tenants have rights and landlords have rights, and then you basically you have
this middle someplace.
Yeah, it's really what happens is it creates a system of animosity between the landlord and the tenant. It creates an adversarial relationship between the two, because that's just.
Ron,
that's just natural.
Yeah. So something I was thinking of, you were talking about Atlanta, right? So that's where I went to college, and that's where my buddy Dave owns like 19 properties, right? So he owns, and they're all single family residences that he has. And, he bought these homes in East Point in College Park for $30,000. Okay. Right. Yeah. Back when everything had hit the skids, and he literally would go to auction and he would look at these homes and say, okay, wait a second. So they're actually marketing this particular home for $30,000, but they're pricing it as if this was in the bad part of town. But you know what? Actually, it's one street over, right? So technically, this could go into the historic district, and they just mislabeled it, right? So the arbitrage of looking at a particular place. So that's one piece of it. But the other piece is, if you're looking to invest, especially if you don't live in that particular place, right? So if you wanted to buy, a condo in Cleveland, Ohio, right? Just, we're here in LA and you want to buy a condo in Cleveland, Ohio, you have to look at the fundamentals, right? So you have to do a lot of research. You have to look at, what could potentially happen to your investment. Is that market inflated because I mean, if you were in 2006, it was inflated because there was a lot of, everybody was buying and there was this huge inflation and everybody, home prices appreciated at incredible levels because it was all, it was artificial. Right. Or, is it because, are you going to have to anticipate paying tons of money in insurance because you're buying a condo in Miami? Right. So those are things to think of. And also, is there something that's artificial because it's temporary? And if there's changes in the government or changes in the economic climate, I'm just, thing that comes immediately to mind is the housing boom that was in South Dakota because of fracking. Right. Is that a passing fad, or is that something that can continue? Right.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, good point. I think if you can identify a market where the population is going to increase and incomes are going to increase, it's a good place to buy, right?
Right.
And that's why the San Francisco area has exploded, because tech invaded and they got those two things. They got the huge increase in population and huge increases in incomes there, and it created San Francisco. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Those are good trends to look out for.
Well, Geoff, thank you so much for coming.
Hey, thank you guys.
And
let's
get your
Thank you for the beer.
information. Yeah, the beer is good, right? The WeWork beer. It's free and on tap. You guys that are missing out on our happy hours, let me tell you, we're serving up free beers. So, Geoff, why don't you go ahead and give any kind of information or contact information?
Sure. Anyone out there listening can follow us on Twitter at GT_investments. A phone number or email?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So
go for it, man.
Our office phone number is 564-6415, and my email is Geoff and that's GEOFF at gt-investments.com.
Great. Well, thanks, Geoff. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Well, that's about it for today. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to leave them for us on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Clarified Realty Podcast, all one word. If you have any questions about real estate or you're looking for someone to help you buy or sell a home, remember, I'm actually a licensed real estate agent, so I'd love to help you out. Please email me directly at tom@clarifiedrealty.com or give me a call at 818-335-7662. Don't be shy. Come on, guys. Give me a ring. For more exclusive bonus content and advice between episodes, please check out our website, www.clarifiedrealty.com. Also on our homepage, you'll find links to helpful buyer and seller guides that can give you some great information for starting your home buying or home seller process, so definitely check those out. Here's a new thing. We actually have an Alexa skill. So search the Alexa store for the Clarified Realty Podcast, add our skill to your daily briefing, and get a dose of real estate news and tips every single day of the year. Definitely give it a try. It's pretty cool. I'm on Snapchat, Twitter, and Instagram as well. My handle for all three of those are @ClarifiedRealty. Please leave feedback and reviews on iTunes or in the comments section on our page. Come on, guys. Together we are stronger. I'm looking for your comments. So if you have any questions or ways that we can make this podcast better, please let us know. My amazing theme song, Hey Now, is from the band Wolf. That's Wolf with 2 Fs. And please go check them out and like them on SoundCloud. They rock so freaking hard, it doesn't matter how many units you have in your building. They're blowing the doors off of every damn one of them. He said units. And just a little disclaimer, I'm licensed by the California Bureau of Real Estate. My license number is 017153353. Ron's is?
Guarantee rate, NMLS ID 2611, NMLS ID 558706, California.
Come on, Ron. And the advice we give is only for properties located in the state of California. For all the other states, please contact your local real estate agent or real estate professional. You need another beer. You okay?
I totally need another beer.
Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
All right, we're all done. Well, that's it. All right, guys. Well, thanks for coming, everybody. And remember, the greatest thing you can ever do is make someone feel at home. Take care, and we'll see you next week.
What you gonna do with your life?